The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the Canadian Rental Housing Index, the most...
Please. The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the Canadian Rental Housing Index, the province of Atlantic Canada that has the most unhealthy rental housing market isn't New Brunswick or PEI or Newfoundland. It's us here in Nova Scotia. And speaking for our part in the NDP, we didn't need the index to tell us this because we are hearing regularly from people who are being served with rental increases of 30, 40, 50, even 55%. So I want to ask the Premier if he also recognizes that the rental housing situation in Nova Scotia is at a real breaking point for an awful lot of people.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the honourable member for the question. He is highlighting a major issue, Mr. Speaker, that we know as parts of our province. We continue to work with rent subs to ensuring that we're providing affordable housing. One of the things that happens, Mr. Speaker, when we see the tremendous growth that is happening in parts of our province, you begin to see the price of real estate continue to escalate, continue to go up. The market demands on that, so it pushes out, Mr. Speaker, some affordable rents that I know that the Leader is very concerned about. It's why we've worked to try to make sure that we put rent subs in place to ensure those families who require that support have them. He would also know that we just signed a national housing agreement with the federal government, and we will continue to work with our partners in the community to make sure that we're providing affordable housing in Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier speaks as he has often spoken in the past when we have questioned and challenged him and his government about this question about rent supplements and the place they have in the government's program for dealing with this situation. But it's increasingly common to hear from people who have in fact been assigned rent supplements who still, nevertheless, are not able to find an affordable, adequate place for themselves to live. Now, surely the Premier can see that in such a tight rental market as we have, it's a pretty easy thing for landlords to choose someone who doesn't have a rent supplement over somebody who does. So I want to ask the Premier if he is confident that everybody with a government rent supplement is actually able to find a place for themselves to live.
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the information I have, Mr. Speaker, is those rent subs are making a positive impact on those who have them. I will undertake from the question of the honourable member whether or not that rent sub is adequate today or whether or not that should be adjusted. I think that's a legitimate question as we look into what we do with the new housing strategy going forward. So if that is not meeting the pressure of the current market that the honourable member is referring to, we certainly will look at that.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the government surely must be as aware as we are aware of how common it is becoming for landlords in the province to undertake renovations as a pretext to evict tenants with the real purpose of making dramatic increases in the rent. When the government first came to office, the word renoviction was not a part of the vocabulary of the housing world in Nova Scotia, but it most certainly is a part of the vocabulary of our housing situation today in the province. So in response to our questions about the housing crisis, Mr. Speaker, we've heard members of the government speak several times about the bilateral housing agreement and what it stands to bring for the future. But can the Premier tell us what his government is going to do to protect tenants from these kinds of renovictions now?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the honourable member for the question. Renoviction wasn't part of the vocabulary of the province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, before we came in, because our economy wasn't growing, Mr. Speaker. We weren't seeing the fast growth that we're seeing with not only population, more young people coming back. We know that it's putting pressure, though, on the housing stock to ensure that we have affordable rents in some parts of our province, Mr. Speaker. It's why I have made a commitment to the honourable member that we will look at whether or not those rent subs are meeting the needs of today when they come in. But the fact of the matter is that the growth that we're seeing is putting pressure on some of these properties. There's absolutely no question about that. a growing economy, providing more opportunities, more jobs. Unemployment is all-time low, Mr. Speaker. We're attracting people back home. That is definitely impacting the affordable housing market, and it's why, with that $400 million from the national government and the rent subsidy we put in place, we'll continue to work with our partners to ensure that we address the very need that the honourable member is bringing up.